Ja, precis. När börjar vi? Okej. All right. Yeah, we're doing this in English. We're confused about language. We are Klingon Academy, Klingonska Akademien, which is a very informal bunch of people. And there's another member there who denies that she's a member because she doesn't think she's skilled enough, but she definitely is. And this me. I got into linguistics because of Klingon, so maybe take it easy on the Klingon. You might turn into a linguistics geek. Yeah.
I also kind of got into linguistics because of Klingon, but I was a worse type of geek before, so that's fine. I was an online game geek, and they were launching a game called Star Trek Online, and I thought, hey, I've heard there's a language for that thing. It's like the pointy-eared aliens that speak it, I think. So I started learning that, and then they started airing Star Trek on TV, and that it proceeded from there.
Cool. All right. So this is an introduction to Klingon, and I am sort of expecting a little bit of audience participation. So mostly you just have to pronounce silly and difficult things to pronounce. And we'll start off rough. Kapla? And that means success. Then the best word in Klingon, the most useful one, is nuchjak. And a really great word that we were introduced to quite recently is hutvar, which just means that there are too many things or people in one place. If you can't find that cup in your cupboard because it's so full of stuff, or if you're really tired of all the people surrounding you, hutvar is the best. Apparently it showed up on because hut means 9 and var means 5, and it showed up on a road called 95 in the US, and people were stuck in traffic or something. Finally, it's good to be able to respond to when people command you things, and the best word for that is ho, which means I refuse, I won't do it, or I just disagree about something. Or if you do accept to do it, it's look. And when you're done, you say pitch. I just imagine Klingon toddlers in the bathroom shouting for the parents when they're done saying pick. But yeah. Can you read this? Yeah, okay. Ika, what does it say? March. Klingon spelling is a little bit weird, as might have Marc Okrand mentioned this earlier, and it is better to spell it with a little bit of serifs. And if you split up the syllables, it's more obvious what this means. So this is a verb prefix, and a verb, and then a suffix. So it means they are impersonating you all with some specific goal in mind. You can also write it in Klingon letters, and it looks like this. It's a little more readable, maybe. Almost no one does this for technical reasons, but it's nice to know that it's there. So, some pronunciation. This is the Klingon alphabet. At the top, we have the vowels, and then we have the consonants. Basically, all the consonants are super easy. Well, almost all of them. The bottom ones are the hard ones. We got the ch sound, and the j sound is the same as in English. So basically you can see that the capitalized letters are all the ones, or the funny letter combinations are the ones that it would be hard for an English speaker to pronounce. And if you look carefully, you'll see that there is no K. The word Klingon has a K, but there is no K in Klingon. We'll return to this. A couple of the sounds are super easy if you're a Swede. So, because in Swedish we assimilate the R with the consonant that comes after, so you don't say värd, you say bad, and that's the Klingon D. I didn't realize this when I was studying Klingon originally, and so I completely overdo these sounds because the connection didn't occur to my brain until much later. So I'm giving you a few example words. Ped. And then the D is the same as in bad. So say that again. Ped. It was snowy when I wrote this. So, and then we have the same thing for the sh sound. It's the same as in fors in Swedish. So you have shish, yeah, shish. March. March. The R is a trilled tip of the tongue R. Well, that's an oversimplification because there's another R as well. But this R is simple, like R, and it's beer. It's really easy to remember because that's the temperature you want your beer to have. Or possibly it's just NG is ng sound, and in Klingon that can come at the beginning of a syllable. So the easiest way to approximate this, I mean, some people find it hard to say. So if you start with saying singing, and then drop the C and say just nging. Congratulations, you have just said to be negatively charged. So like nging tem, the electron is negatively charged. March. Those were the easy sounds. Now we have and which are the same sound. You can, if you put your hand on your throat when you're saying it, you should have like a relative low vibration for the sound, but when you say you feel it more severely in your throat. For an example, we have hoch, which means to kill, and then hoch, March, which is a week, 6 days, of course, because it's a Klingon week. And then Ror. So in the first one, we have two voiceless without the vibration on your mouth or in your throat. And the bottom one has the vibration to both of them. And it's good to be able to do distinctions between these two because they're super important. Then there's the capital Q and lowercase q. That's the only case where case matters in Klingon. And the lowercase q is k. So it's like a K-like sound, as in hek, which means to hail. What I didn't say is like all these weather words, the previous shish and ped, are verbs. So it's not nouns, it's not snow on the ground, it's the snow falling from the sky. And the shish is the water falling from the sky. The same goes for here. Hek is the verb to hail. Hek. And then you have hek. March, you're doing this good. And here's the Klingon stuff then. The lack of a K, I need my hands for this. Can I give you my microphone? Yes. So the best way to say is to start with a l sound. Just say a normal l, as in, yeah. Then you have your tongue like this. And then you say it again, but you do it voicelessly. So this time you don't say l, you say just a whisper. And then finally you spit that out. But the tip of the tongue stays glued to the roof of your mouth. And that's how you say Klingon. And you also have ngan, a syllable that starts with like just like ng. Ngan means inhabitant. So this is the inhabitant of Kli, maybe? We don't know exactly. The final letter is the apostrophe. It is a letter like anybody else. It's if you leave out an apostrophe or if you add one in where it should be one, you have committed a spelling mistake. That's just wrong. You're not supposed to do that. It's pronounced as in uh-oh. So we have oo. Sometimes you can hear it like an extra breath afterwards. So it's oo with this extra puff of air. And it's also not ooh. You don't like fade into the vowel. It is this blockage in the throat before you release the vowel that is the apostrophe. So it's ooh. if there's any letter, any word that you hear that you think begin in a vowel, you're just wrong. That's not a vowel, it's an apostrophe, it's a glottal stop that it starts with. And this is mostly true in Swedish and English as well. Not always, but especially in the beginning of a sentence, or if you just, when you're just starting to speak. So you can just borrow it from there, basically. We have the difference between ro. Say that again. That's good enough. And then ro. So one is situation, and the other is baby. And sometimes it matters. There's a Klingon proverb saying, "Doptak kuyichenmoch kobde ro," which means, you want to say it? Marge. Let's try that again. Doptak kuyichenmoch kobde ro. Oh, that is surprisingly good. You're really good at this. This means that you should make the fire to the side when there's danger. That when you're making camp or something, put this fire not in your camp but next to it, so your enemy will be attracted to that. But if you say it wrong, you might wind up saying "Doptak kuyichenmoch robdi ro." Set a fire to the side when the baby wages war. A couple of other examples where it's good to be able to make the distinctions. Krak, say krak. Marge. That means good, to be good. There's also kak, which means to be preferable. But then there's also kak, which is to behave as if you have honor when you have none. So you better not mix that one up with one of the two previous ones. Okay, we got some pronunciation. Let's try these again and see if we can do them any better than the first time around. So, success. Kapla. Much. Huh, what did you say? Nukjak. Much. And if there are too many things or people in the same place, it's goedbaar. Much. No, I refuse. I disagree. Okay, I will do it. Look. And finally, when you're done, you say pitch. Much. Sometimes you see funny letter combinations. We have in Klingon, there's the tip of the tongue R, like we had in beer. But that can sometimes meet up with a sort of similar to the French R, not quite, but almost. So we have char. So that's at the end. Say that again. Much. That means to conquer. Char means to drop something. Char. That means to be slimy.
Right, so we had a word previously, which was basically just a string of vertical lines. And I think the reason somebody in the audience could parse that is because Klingon has a very regular syllabic structure. There was actually one other possible interpretation, which was that there was some verb, le, that was then modified with li. But that would be highly improbable, because if you look through all of the verbs in the Klingon language, I think 98.2% of them have the structure consonant, verb, consonant. For the last consonant, I'm also counting the clusters you mentioned, R, G, H, W, apostrophe, and Y apostrophe. With nouns, it's a bit more complicated. It's only about 81.7% consonant, verb, consonant. But for the most part, you can use this to get a very intuitive sense of what a word, how a word should be written, should be parsed. And speaking of syllables.
Yeah, we have the word syllable. Indoor. That's in as in bell, and dor as in silly bell. Klingon has a whole bunch of puns just spread out through the entire language, and there's a lot of silly words, which is great when you try to learn the language because there's almost like no borrowings, so all the words are weird and foreign, and it's really hard to memorize the words. But you're greatly helped by this ingenious, silly jokes that it just sprinkles throughout the language. And these are Tumblr. Do you guys know Tom Lehrer? Yes. He made a song called The Elements, and so Tumblr means element. There's cred. Quod erat demonstrandum, that which should be proven, or something like that in Latin. Common thing in science. Chord. Head of department or captain. Dash. I think the joke is mostly textual here. I think also, if I don't misremember, I seem to recall Marc has told the story of how Das Boot, the old submarine movie, was like a big influence in why they wanted to do Klingon to begin with. They wanted to do a Das Boot in space and have more of the culture. So it's a huge influence, and that's why the joke is there. We have kill, because that's how you cancel people, I guess. I don't know. You have click. Apparently there's a guy called Stu Click, right? And so click is Stu. Ew! Of course, Klingons would think that about blood. Roti. Do you recognize that one? Yeah. So some guy, was it George Bernard Shaw or something, said that that's how you're supposed to spell fish in English. It's GH like in tough, O like in women, and T like in nation, fish. Roti. And of course that's the Klingon word for fish. Why wouldn't it be? How are we doing this? All right. Klingon hoch ich. Who's killing whom in this sentence? Yeah. It's one cocky trouble. Sure. There's a bunch of verb. Yeah, oh, okay, no, dizzy in my head. The object is first, and then the verb, and then the subject. So it is the yich, the triple, that does the choch to the Klingon, and that's how it works. If you are talking about yourself or someone else, you usually use prefixes. So if I'm seeing something, I say giler. If you're seeing something?
Yes, or if I'm describing you seeing something, I could say, biler.
Yes. Oh, we should do this again. Giler. Much. Biler. Much. And if I'm seeing you, well, no, if I'm seeing you, I would say kaler.
And if I wish to confirm that yes, you do see me, I can say choler.
Yeah. This whole system is quite complicated. This is the table of all possible combinations. Some of them mean multiple things. So you can see that if you see something, then it doesn't matter whether it's da would be daler if you see one thing or many things. But yeah, that's the whole table. I still don't know it by heart, I must admit. So there is also a bunch of suffixes, and the suffixes come after the words that they modify. So here you have chuchochvip. You are afraid to kill me. And that is cho, you do something to me, choch, kill, and vip, be afraid. And then chochoch vip be. You are not afraid to kill me. And chochoch betpip. You are afraid to not kill me. No, you're afraid not to kill me. The other way around. This can grow quite complicated. Da chenish kap moch lach chutnech chur. All right, let's try that again. Da chenish kap moch lach chutnech chur. It is rarely this complicated in practice. This is like an elaborate example. And if you want to see which part corresponds to which part. So, if there are any questions at any point, just yell. I am not afraid to be interrupted. Oh, do you want to try this again? Da chenish kap moch lach chutnesh chur. Much.
Right, so we've gone through quite a lot of grammar and pronunciation there. So I was thinking we should take just a very simple question. And I think that those of you who were here during the earlier session will already know the answer to this. How do you say hi in Klingon? And yes, as you know now, you shouldn't say hi in Klingon. That is simply not something that Klingons do. Another thing that you shouldn't do is ask Bing Translator how to say hi in Klingon. Because it is in their commonly used phrases section, and it's a lot of fun to go through that commonly used phrases section because it contains a lot of errors. If you ask it to say, I'm a vegetarian, it will translate it as, there definitely isn't anything that I like. If you ask it to translate, I am vegan, it will tell you simply, I am right. So basically, in order to speak Klingon well, you sort of need to think like a Klingon. Maybe not quite to the level of, initiating a blood feud with somebody, but enough to understand that you shouldn't just translate the words that you would normally say, but rather try to find appropriate phrases for similar contexts. There is actually a great guide to this. If you have your old cassette player and feel like listening to something on your way to work, there's a cassette guide called Power Klingon, where Worf, voiced by Michael Dorn, reveals that above all else, Klingon warriors value 4 main ideals of behavior: accuracy, straightforwardness, aggressiveness, and strength. This often means not doing things that we would normally do in English or Swedish, such as trying to express things indirectly to be more polite, or using pleasantries like please and thank you in order to just smooth the cogs of social life. In Klingon, you usually want to say things as directly and precisely as possible. And fortunately, Klingon does provide a lot of tools for this. For instance, we mentioned the verb suffixes. There are 36 of them in total. We will not be quizzing you on them after the presentation. But I'd just like to point out column number 6 here, which is called qualification. This is a set of verb prefixes used to describe how certain you feel about a statement. So for instance, let's say you're sitting in a boat, and things are going quite well. Boat is, or ship is Deutsch. And you think, this ship won't sink. Sink is ok be is won't sink. And if you want to say, you're not certain the ship won't sink, but you get that general sense. You can add the suffix lau, which means apparently or seemingly. So ok be lau Deutsch means the ship doesn't seem like it will sink. So if we go to the next slide, oh yes, I should have you repeat the sentence because we're doing well on time. So, ok be lau Deutsch. Very good. So the next suffix will be ba. Feels very familiar in Swedish. That's just bah. And that's technically, you haven't necessarily done the math, you haven't done any scientific investigation, but it seems pretty obvious what's going to happen. Och badudj. So that means the ship will obviously sink. It's standing, vertically. And so the next one is actually a level higher up. As you can see, the front fell off, or maybe it's the back, I'm not sure. But at this point, you can say that, yes, the ship will definitely sink. Och badudj. And then we actually have the fourth one, and this is sort of the odd one out, because it's not quite a level of certainty, but rather a level of degree to which something has happened. Chu means that something has happened as much as it can. It has happened completely or perfectly. Och chupu duj. So that means the ship has sunk completely. Now, as if that wasn't enough, we also have 26 noun suffixes. And again, we have a whole column dedicated to describing how certain we feel about something. So, for instance, let's say we have a word like bird, or båter. Very good. So you see something in the distance, you feel like that looks like a bird to me. That looks like a båter. So that means like an apparent bird. I'm not quite sure, but it looks like a bird to me, or it sounds like a bird, or due to some previous knowledge that I have, it should be a bird. I'm pretty sure it's a bird, So you could say, for instance, Choltach båter. That means an apparent bird is approaching. I'm not specifying how certain I am that it's approaching, but it's approaching. The apparent bird is approaching. Now, let's say I get a closer look, and I can confirm that, yes, this is definitely a bird. Then I can use the suffix na. Also means salty, but that's not relevant here. But yes, so let's say you're a Klingon in this circumstance, so you see that bird and you just think, well, that bird looks tasty. And you know it's a bird now, so you can say, Elau båter nattbäck. Very nice. Actually, let's do that once more. Elau båter nattbäck. Very nice. So that definite bird looks delicious. Now the thing is, you're not actually very good at identifying birds. So your friend who's standing next to you is a bit dubious about your claim. He's also looked at this so-called bird and is dubious. So he uses the suffix kok, which means so-called, and expresses doubt about our statement. So he then says to you, that so-called bird is definitely going to eat us. Nu shopbench båter kokbäck. Yes, once more. Nu shopbench båter kokbäck. March. And let's see here. Right, so who are we, what are we, where are we even? We didn't sleep very well tonight, so we're honestly not sure. But we think we're talking about the fastest growing language in the universe. At least speaking like percentually in terms of proportion of words added in the last few years and speakers added in the last few years. So here's a chart that Zrajm put together.
Yes. So the claim that Klingon is the fastest growing language in the universe, I would manage to hunt it down, and it's on the cover of another audio cassette course, Conversational Klingon, which together with the previously mentioned Power Klingon is really good if you want to practice your pronunciation, because it's got Marc Okrand's beautiful voice on it, and we all know that that's perfect pronunciation. This graph is kind of interesting. You can see this big jump here. That's the Klingon dictionary being published Funnily enough, the first words are older than that, and that's the words from the first movie. So they're like 7 or I don't know, something like that, many words before then. And suddenly we jump up to 1,500 words. Then there's a new edition of the Klingon dictionary, and they add an addendum with some extra words. Some time passed, Marc Okrand comes with little input here and there, and so the language slowly grows. Here is Klingon for the Galactic Traveler, and then it sort of takes off. There is no like single big event in the same sense as with those 2 early ones, but there's like a continuous ticking upwards. And so Klingon is truly the fastest growing language in the universe. Not in terms of speakers maybe, but definitely in terms of words.
Right, so a lot of that growth comes from whenever Mark publishes a new book. Some of it comes from when we send him a big list of questions and make him answer our questions. Some of that growth also comes from when words that were created for Star Trek get an official Klingon pronunciation and spelling. So for instance, the word Kalis was first used in the original series, when of course the Klingon language didn't really exist. So that had to wait 16 years until Mark wrote the first edition of the Klingon dictionary to get the pronunciation Kalish. Kalish. Very nice. And a lot of people who watch Star Trek Discovery are angry about that pronunciation. We keep telling them, no, that's perfect, that's what it's supposed to be, as far as we're concerned. There was also the word Batlev that Mark mentioned. And fortunately, he was working on the 2nd edition of the Klingon dictionary right then and there. So they actually only had to wait for 2 years for the word Beklech to show up. Maj. Stovokor, you might think this would have been earlier. I think a lot of Klingon speakers are more into like linguistics than they are into Klingon mythology. So we just never really asked, how do we say Stovokor in Klingon? I mean, we can tell that it starts with 2 consonants. You can't start a word with 2 consonants. Every word begins with 1 consonant and 1 vowel. But similar to, for instance, in Japanese when they have a borrowed word, or in this case when it's actually borrowed from Klingon into English, there is actually just a slightly swallowed U sound there. So it's Stovokor. Maj. And then also, so that one waited about 17 years, and then there's also Kuvamar, which was mentioned in an episode of Star Trek Voyager, a sort of messianic figure. And that received a Klingon definition or Klingon pronunciation in 2020, so 19 years later, and that was Kuvamak. Maj. And this doesn't actually just happen for words defined in Star Trek. Sometimes other shows also decide to make up words. So in the same year as Kuvamar was first used in Star Trek Voyager, The Simpsons had an episode called Worst Episode Ever, in which comic book guy tries going to Moe's Tavern and annoys everybody and gets thrown out. At which point he asks, is there a word in Klingon for loneliness? And then he looks it up in his dictionary and says, ah yes, Gardak. Don't learn that, because that's not quite right. But basically, for the last, I guess, 23 years, we've been telling people, oh, that's just nonsense. You shouldn't listen to that. That's not a word. Until about 2 weeks ago, at Kepchoma in Germany, when somebody asked Mark, and apparently, yes, that is Gardak. Maj. So now, the next time you get thrown out of a bar, be sure to, shake your fist at the sky and yell, Gardak! Maj. Right, and this is also something that we Klingon speakers need to adapt to, because we're using this language, and sometimes we don't have all the words that we need, so we need to adapt. So of course, every year I've tweeted about the Gävlebocken being built, and sometimes being ceremoniously or unceremoniously unbuilt by means of fire. And when I first started mentioning it, I didn't really have any word for that kind of animal. So I called it a shark. And that's described basically as the closest thing Klingons have to a horse. I figure a goat is kind of a small horse. This particular type of horse also apparently has like 1 meter long tusks. So that's kind of like a goat as well, I figure. So I called it the Jävle Shark. Yeah. And also, in most of these you'll see, I've been a bit naughty actually. I haven't put asterisks around the word Jävle, which I should do, because that's just a word I made up. And normally we mark those words with asterisks so that other people don't copy them and think. So basically I called the city of Gävle, Gävle. And then I didn't update the bold text in the middle. But I should have said that I started calling it a Gävle Dirrak. Do you want to say Dirrak? So that had been defined as a sheep, I believe in the Klingon version of Tapuk Mach, or the Little Prince. So I think, yeah, a sheep is closer to a goat than a horse is. But actually, since 2020, we do now have a word for a Klingon animal resembling a goat. It's called a raptjar. So, yeah, basically now we have everything we need to describe a goat from Gävle, well, except that we don't really have a canonical way to spell Gävle, Mark. Can you provide some elucidation? Oh, perfect. So now, right after this, I'm going to go on to, not Twitter anymore actually, but on Blue Sky, and write about the Jävle Raptjar, completely without any sort of asterisks to mark this as theoretical. And this also makes Gävle the first place in Sweden to have a canonical Klingon name. Right, and was that... Right. So we mentioned the word kok, or suffix kok earlier, used to call something so-called or alleged. So there are some examples floating around online of so-called Klingon language. The most obvious example is when somebody uses a word-by-word translator. This sometimes shows up in Star Trek novels, such as this scene where somebody specifically mentions how perfect and unaccented the Klingon was. The Klingon was supposed to mean the enemy casts no shadow, but it ended up as, she throws a spear at the traitor, no, a shadow. So basically, Klingon grammar is almost sort of reverse from English, and also those word-by-word translators can't pick up on homographs. So that never works out well. There is the slightly more advanced version, which we've warned against a couple of times now, which is Bing Translator, which shows up whenever you're trying to enter something into Minecraft's crowd-funded translation program. You get a little suggestion from Bing Translate, which is why the Klingon version of Minecraft is kind of rubbish right now. It tells you that a carved pumpkin is called Kotnosh, which is, of course, the name of the Klingon homeworld. And that has to do with the fact that it's statistical machine translation, but doesn't have enough of a bilingual corpus to actually provide good machine translation. A lot of it is Shakespeare. So if you see a text that contains the names Guildenstern or Rosencrantz, especially when thanking somebody, that usually means it comes from Bing Translate. If you enter thanks, it will just say Guildenstern, which means Guildenstern. And it's used in a lot of places. Again, a lot of licensed Star Trek products use Bing Translate. And the results are somewhat hilarious a lot of the time.
Among Klingon speakers, people often refer to this as Bing Ho.
Yes. Or Bing on Hol, to me, yes.
Yeah.
So Bing on, basically. And finally, you might be thinking, well, ChatGPT is amazing. And it is in many ways. But it's not very good at Klingon yet. So a while back, I tried to ask it, well, how would I say I'm allergic to gluten? This isn't very difficult in Klingon, it's just ngam ek klar. But basically, this gave me something like, the enemy girl uses Kalis, or something like that. And I asked, Kalis, isn't there a famous Klingon by that name? And I got the response, yes, actually. The name Kalish just so happens to be the same as the Klingon word for gluten, which isn't true. But it then added, it is possible the naming of this character was influenced by the Klingon name for gluten. Although this has not been confirmed by the creators of the Star Trek franchise. So every new version of ChatGPT, I try this out. It gets some things scarily correct, which makes me worried for my future job prospects in multiple fields. But it is also very prone to being confidently incorrect about things. Right, so where can we find out more about ourselves, or us, if seeing ourselves from a different perspective?
Yeah, if you want to know stuff about what's going on in Sweden, I guess maybe you shouldn't go to klingonska.org. It's got a lot of interesting resources. There's a canon archive, and multiple people tell me how wonderful it is. I have no idea why. But unfortunately, there isn't much information when it comes to what we're up to, because we're only occasionally up to things, like coming here. But it is a resource. I think probably you would say something more interesting on Blue Sky or something. I don't know. Did you tell people we were going here?
Sometimes I say interesting things on Blue Sky and Instagram. A lot of the times I just say things. So that's the risk you take if you search for the word Klingonska on basically any social media platform.
So as long as you just want to know things, not interesting things, you're fine.
Yes. If you go to the Klingon language wiki, it will say that Klingonska is the official account of Klingonska Akademien, which isn't true. It's just me. But 90% of the time it's relevant to what we do.
And it is absolutely true, because you're part of Klingonska Akademien.
Yes.
Yeah. The Klingon Language Institute has a webpage that's also a great resource. They are way better at telling what they're up to. They also have a Klingon language learning group on Facebook, and there's a Discord. Do you have to be a member to come to their Discord? I don't remember.
I think they have private rooms and stuff where, yeah. If
you participate in one of the APME, their big meetings, you can do that online as well, I think. And you would do that there. They also have a Google Calendar, which I have synced to my little phone, so I see these little events popping up, and I never go to them. But basically, that's a very good way of getting a chance to practice spoken Klingon, which is really good for your spoken Klingon. So yeah, then there's also a big contingent of people in Germany, most significantly the Stockholm, which is in Saarbrücken every year, so you don't have to go to the US to go to a really big Klingon meeting. Those meetings are also very much geared towards beginners, though they have a lot of beginners courses and stuff.
And you need to know German.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Most of that stuff is in German, though. So, but if you have a pretty good grasp of Klingon, you might be able to learn German by going there. And it's actually a pretty good, nice atmosphere, and a lot of people to talk to, so that's really nice. And we also, like, just a couple of months ago, there was a, what do you call it, Evropcup meeting in Copenhagen, where we were 10 more advanced Klingon speakers who came together to hold a meeting, which was not about Klingon, but just in Klingon. And that was really cool. That was the first thing like that I went to. I felt like I was one of the least advanced speakers there, but it was still like språkbad, like really immersive and really cool. I hope we'll do that again, and by the looks of it, it's gonna happen again.
Right, I could just mention that for my first Kepchom in Germany, I actually had to turn down a ticket to the Nobel banquet, and I do not regret it for a second, but please don't tell my parents that I did that.
Cool.
Yeah, I think we're
done.
Do we have more? Yeah.
We have 30 more seconds.
Oh. Should we do Tach Judge Wall?
Oh, you know Tach Judge Wall?
Everybody knows Dr. Judge Ho, right?
Okay.
It was very popular in the 90s.
Well, it's probably on YouTube, but you don't have internet on this thing. Do you want to try it?
We could,
Yeah, okay.
although I don't think we have time.
Let's go over time.
Okay.
All right. Tach Judge Wo, it's Tach Judge Wo Lechma. We toy mo, wat nu kuv moch Judge Ta. Dun wo mach, it's kosh churvai, wat dash me mach bing dak chach di bek moch chu jai.
Thank you.